All right, buckle up, everybody, because today we are taking a deep dive into modality. Like necessity, possibility, all that good stuff.
The really fun stuff.
Exactly. And we are going to be taking a look at how philosophers throughout history have thought about this topic.
Should be fun.
Yeah. We're using the Stanford Encyclopedia of Philosophy's entry on medieval theories of modality.
Great source.
Yeah, and one of the most interesting things we found was that before the 12th century, philosophers didn't even really think about possible worlds. So get ready for some conceptual upheaval.
It is pretty wild how much our thinking about what could be has changed over time.
Okay, so let's put ourselves in the sandals of some ancient Greek philosophers for a second. How on earth would they wrap their heads around modality without the concept of possible worlds?
Right. Well, the source calls it the frequency model.
Okay, so what is that?
So, essentially, if something happened all the time, it was considered necessary. Like, if it never, ever, ever failed to happen.
Makes sense. Okay, so what if it never happened?
Well, then, obviously, it would be impossible.
And if it only happened sometimes?
Ding, ding, ding. You got it. That's possibility.
So it's all about how often something occurs in our one and only universe.
Yeah, it really fits with their idea of a single ordered universe where everything that can happen eventually does happen. Take Aristotle, for example.
Okay, yeah, he was a big deal.
Huge. He believed in eternal beings, so their existence was considered necessary because, well, they always were and always will be.
Oh, I see, yeah. But wait, hold on a sec. Wouldn't that mean that anything that doesn't happen is automatically impossible? I mean, like all those what-if moments, the road's not taken.
This is true.
Like, what if I become a concert pianist or world-famous chef?
You bring up a really good point, and that's actually one of the limitations of this model.
Yeah.
It doesn't quite handle those unrealized possibilities, especially the ones that are unique to each person.
Yeah, okay, I see. So how did they explain those could-have-beens? Like, how would Aristotle have explained my unrealized potential as a concert pianist?
Well, they had this other idea that they used, the idea of potency.
Potency.
Yeah, so it's kind of like how a seed has the potential to become a tree,
Oh, okay.
but it needs the right conditions.
Yeah, of course. Water, sunlight, soil.
Exactly, and this idea actually connects with Aristotle's concept of active and passive potencies.
Active and passive. What's that all about?
So active potency is like the power to cause change, like the sunlight helping the seed sprout. And passive potency is the capacity to be changed, like the seed's potential to grow in the first place.
Okay, that's a cool analogy. But even with potency, I'm still kind of stuck on this idea that they are limited to a fixed view of what's possible. Like, are they saying there's just one set of potentials and that's it?
Well, surprisingly, even way back then, philosophers debated whether the future was predetermined or open to some genuine alternatives.
Really?
Yeah, you had, for instance, Diodorus Cronus, who was all about determinism. He believed everything was set in stone, no two ways about it.
Wow. Okay.
But then you had the Stoics, who believed in fate, but they also thought that some possibilities remained open until they were prevented in some way.
So even without possible worlds, they were already grappling with some seriously deep questions about free will and determinism. The same questions we ask today, really.
Exactly, and those questions are just going to get even more complicated when we arrived at Augustine of Hippo. Now he brought a whole new perspective, a real game changer to how people thought about possibilities.
Oh, Augustine. This should be good.
Yeah, so he introduces this really revolutionary idea. God chooses from a realm of, get this, simultaneous alternatives when creating the world.
Simultaneous alternatives. Okay, now my brain is starting to hurt. So he's saying there are multiple possibilities all existing at once, even though only one actually becomes reality.
Precisely.
Wow. That's a massive shift from just looking at what happens or doesn't happen in our single universe.
It was huge. This idea just blew open the doors to a much wider scope of what's possible. And importantly, it tied directly into debates about God's omnipotence.
Well, yeah, of course. If God could have made things differently, then suddenly you've had this whole new set of questions about free will.
Right. And it also raises questions about the nature of reality itself.
So now we've got God curating this cosmic menu of possible worlds and choosing which one to bring to life. Fascinating. But tell me, what kind of philosophical dishes were they whipping up with this new ingredient?
Well, for one, it led to debates about the limits of God's power. Take, for example, Gilbert of Poitiers, a thinker from the 12th century. He went so far as to argue that even the laws of nature themselves could be different if God so desired.
Whoa, hold on. Is he saying that gravity could work in reverse?
He was really pushing the idea of the contingency of the natural order. Like, what if the universe we know isn't the only way things could be?
Mind-blowing. So now we're not just talking about what does happen, but also what could have happened? This is a pretty big deal. This whole simultaneous alternatives thing really shakes things up. I'm sure it sparked some serious debates.
Oh, you bet it did. And that's where things get even more fascinating as medieval logicians step in to bring some order to this chaos of possibilities. But that, my friend, is a story for part two.
All right, so last time we were talking about Augustine and this mind-blowing idea he came up with.
Yeah, his idea that God chooses from all these possible worlds, right?
Right, it kind of changes everything about how we think about what's necessary and what's, well, just coincidence.
It totally shifts our whole understanding of possibility.
Exactly. And speaking of systems, I hear that the medieval logicians were all about bringing order to that chaos. So how did they go about systematizing these possibilities, all these new possibilities that Augustine opened up?
So picture this. You're a medieval scholar surrounded by scrolls and quills. You have this amazing but also kind of overwhelming task in front of you. You have to make sense of all these simultaneous alternatives, all these possible worlds.
Right. What do you do?
Flowcharts.
Diagrams, maybe some heated debates about categories.
Exactly. They loved categorizing. They even went so far as to develop diagrams similar to those used in logic today, just to visualize all the different types of modality.
So it wasn't enough to just think about the what-ifs. They wanted to break it all down.
Oh yeah, they wanted to get into the nitty-gritty of possibility.
I can respect that?
Oh yeah, they loved it. They even distinguished between these subtle shades of maybe. You had your natural possibilities.
Okay.
Those are the things that follow from, well, from the nature of something.
Like birds can fly because they have wings.
Exactly. Then you have your contingent possibilities, those things that, might or might not happen.
Like, will it rain tomorrow?
Exactly. And then there were remote possibilities, the things that are unlikely but not impossible.
Like winning the lottery 5 times in a row?
Exactly.
Wow. Talk about having all the bases. Sounds like when you open that door to infinite possibilities, you're going to need a pretty good filing system.
And this love of categories led them to make some really important distinctions, like, for example, the difference between didicto and de re modality.
Ah, yes, didicto and de re. Just a little reminder for our listeners. What are those again?
Okay, imagine you hear someone say, a standing man can sit.
Sounds simple enough.
Right, but then you realize, wait a minute, he can't sit while he's standing.
Uh-huh, gotcha.
And that's the difference. Didicto refers to the possibility of the statement itself.
Okay.
So the statement, a standing man can sit, is false didicto because you can't both sit and stand at the same time.
Ah, all right. So didicto is about what's possible, according to, the way we describe it.
Yeah.
What about de re?
De re is about the possibility of the thing itself.
Okay.
So that same statement, a standing man can sit, would actually be true de re.
Because he could sit down later.
Exactly. He has the potential to sit, even if he's not doing it right now.
Ah, so it's about what's possible for that man, regardless of how we happen to be talking about him. I get it. But why does this distinction even matter? I mean, why is it so hung up on this?
Because it shows how the same statement can have totally different modal properties depending on how we interpret it. And that's super important when you're dealing with, complex arguments, especially in philosophy and theology.
Okay, I see where you're going with this. This sounds like it's going to have some pretty big implications for those debates about God's knowledge and free will that we were talking about earlier.
You got it. The big question was whether God's knowledge of the future kind of forces things to happen a certain way. Like, if God already knows I'm going to order pizza tonight, does that mean I have to order pizza? What if I suddenly decide I want tacos instead?
Yeah, that's a good question. It seems like if God already knows everything I'm going to do, my choices wouldn't really matter. So much for my free will.
And that's exactly the kind of problem that they wrestled with, but they could actually use this didicto distinction.
Oh, okay, how?
They could say that, okay, maybe God's knowledge of the future is necessary didicto.
Meaning, it's part of how we define God.
Yeah, God necessarily knows it will happen,
Okay.
but the event itself could still be contingent de re.
Meaning I could have chosen tacos.
Exactly, it could have happened differently.
So they found a way to let God know everything without turning us into puppets. I like it. But tell me, did everyone buy into this whole God choosing from possible worlds thing? Or were there any, alternative theories floating around?
Oh, not everyone was convinced. Enter John Duns Scotus, 14th century philosopher extraordinaire, and he came to shake things up.
Uh-oh. Here comes the troublemaker. What did Scotus bring to the table?
Well, he took this whole simultaneous alternatives thing even further than Augustine.
Okay. How so?
He said that these possibilities exist independently of God.
Whoa, wait a minute. Hold on. He's saying there's this, cosmic realm of pure possibility out there. And it doesn't matter if God exists or not.
Exactly. He called these possibilities logical possibilities. And he argued that they're not caused by anything, not even God.
Wow. That's a pretty bold claim. So we've gone from possibility as frequency to possibility as God's blueprint, and now to possibility as this independent, uncaused realm. My head is spinning. What happens next?
Well, that's a story for part 3 of our deep dive.
Okay, so we've made quite a journey. We started in ancient Greece, where possibility was all about how often things happened, then on to Augustine's idea of God choosing from a menu of possible
A
worlds.
real cosmic buffet.
And last time we left off with John Duns Scotus, who just blew everyone's mind by saying that possibilities exist independently, like even without God. Talk about a philosophical bombshell.
It really was a paradigm shift. I mean, Scotus's idea that possibilities are this fundamental, uncaused thing, completely independent of any actual world, really shook things up in philosophy.
Yeah, I bet. So how did other philosophers respond to that? Were they on board with this idea?
Well, some were and some weren't, as you can imagine. Some thinkers, like Thomas Aquinas, for instance, they weren't ready to just abandon the idea that possibilities needed some kind of foundation,
Right.
Like, they argued that possibilities were ultimately rooted in God, maybe reflecting some kind of divine idea or, like, archetype.
So for them, God was still the ultimate source of reality, not this free-floating realm of pure possibility.
Exactly. So it really becomes a question of where you locate the source of what could be.
Man, that's getting pretty deep. But I'm curious how these debates, about the foundation of possibility, how did those play out in more down-to-earth philosophical discussions?
Well, one area where Codis's ideas had a huge impact was in discussions about the distinction between logical and natural necessity.
Okay, back to Logic 101. Could you remind us what those are again?
Sure. So logical necessity is about what's true based on the laws of logic. It doesn't matter how the world actually is.
Okay, so, like, it's logically necessary that a triangle has 3 sides.
Exactly. No matter what universe you're in, that's always going to be true.
Right. Okay, that makes sense. So logical necessity is about pure reason, statements that are just true by definition. What about natural necessity?
Natural necessity is about what must happen according to the laws of nature, at least in our world.
Okay,
So, for example, it's naturally necessary that objects fall to the ground because of gravity.
right, you on Earth anyway.
At least in our universe, yeah.
Okay, I think I'm following. So logical necessity applies to every possible world, while natural necessity is about what happens to be true in our world. Is that right?
Exactly. And with Scotus's idea of independent possibilities, philosophers started to really ask, well, is everything that's naturally necessary also logically necessary?
Like, just because something always happens in our world, does that mean it has to happen in every conceivable world?
Yeah, and some philosophers like Jean Buridan in the 14th century, he argued that you could have natural necessities that weren't logically necessary.
So maybe there's a world out there where gravity works in reverse, or time flows backward, or everyone has purple hair.
Exactly. The possibilities are endless, and that's what's so amazing about Scotus's legacy. He didn't just spark these really abstract debates about the source of possibility, he also really influenced how philosophers approach reasoning itself.
Really? Tell me more about that. How did his ideas change how people thought?
Well, one of the key developments was the rise of something called obligations logic. It was a way of exploring all these possible scenarios in a really rigorous way.
Obligations logic? Sounds intense.
It was basically a set of rules for arguing about what could be true, not just what is true. So imagine you're in the middle of this philosophical debate, right? You're throwing around different claims and counterclaims.
Yeah, I can picture it.
Obligations logic provided this framework for keeping the debate logically sound, even when you're dealing with hypothetical or counterfactual statements.
So it's like a toolkit for constructing thought experiments.
Yeah, you can use it to explore these different possibilities, see how different claims relate to each other, and just see where it all leads.
Fascinating. And that leads us to counterfactuals, right? Those what if history had gone differently? Questions that we all love to ponder?
Yes, and Scotus's ideas, these independent possibilities, they provided a whole new framework for thinking about those scenarios.
So now, instead of just speculating, philosophers could use these tools to actually explore these possibilities in a much more rigorous and systematic way.
Exactly.
Wow, we've covered a lot of ground in this deep dive. So what would you say is the main takeaway here? What's the legacy of this journey from ancient Greek frequency to Scotus's mind-blowing independent possibilities?
I think the key takeaway is this. How we think about possibility shapes how we understand, well, everything, from the laws of physics to the nature of free will to the structure of logical arguments, even to how we imagine different futures. It all comes back to how we think about what's possible.
So even though these ideas might seem abstract, they actually have huge implications for how we view the world and our place in it.
Absolutely. And as we've seen, these questions about possibility, they're always evolving, always pushing us to refine our understanding of what's possible, what's necessary, and what might be out there beyond the limits of what we currently know.
And with that, we'll leave you with one final thought to ponder. If, as Scotus argued, possibilities exist independently of any actual world, could there be countless unactualized worlds out there, just waiting to be explored by our imagination.
It's a fascinating thought, isn't it?
Worlds where maybe gravity works differently, or time flows backward, or hey, maybe I did become that concert pianist after all.
The possibilities are endless, so keep asking those what-if questions and never stop exploring this amazing world of possibility.
Until next time, stay curious, everyone.